Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah, forward deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, forward deck.
Which are the two?
I'm glad you can go first. Sorry, Elizabeth.
What's that? Okay. Okay.
Because if you use
I don't
another
know.
one, it's gonna destroy everything is gonna shut down.
It's 9:01 a.m., November 13, 2019. I'm calling the meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board of Directors together. Today, we're on the second floor conference room of City Hall. Is there any public comment?
None received.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to consider the minutes from the October 9th meeting, review and adopt. Have a motion second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3 are a series of presentations that we've requested from various agencies in preparation for our board retreat next month. To accommodate the city, Mr. Coronado, because there's another meeting that he has to go to shortly, I'm going to move his item to the front.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for being here and for putting together a presentation for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Luis Coronado with the Bridges, City of El Paso. So thank you for having us today. Thank you for the chance to talk to you all about what we are doing at Bridges. I've been with Bridges now for about almost 5 years now, actually, since 2015, when the city underwent restructuring within multiple departments, and Bridges was one of them. Back in 2015, Bridges received additional staffing and resources to revamp operations, improve the bridge system, and then work with stakeholders on both sides of the city. And so today we want to show you what we've done since then, and then projects that we have active today. So for those of you that are not familiar with the bridge system in El Paso, there's 4 bridges within the city limits. Paso del Norte and Stanton to the south of us here downtown. Bridge of the Americas, more central part of the city, and then Isleta Zaragoza on the far east side to the east. There's two others, Santa Teresa, and then also Tornillo Guadalupe outside the city limits. Santa Teresa is in New Mexico, and then Tornillo Guadalupe, like I said, in El Paso County, owned by the county of El Paso. Within the city limits, there's three bridges that the city owns: Paso del Norte, Stanton, and Zaragoza. Bridge of the Americas is owned by the federal government, and so that bridge is free. It is not tolled, and it's owned by the federal government. But at PDN, Stanton, and Zaragoza, the city tolls those crossers that use those bridges, whether they're walking in a personal vehicle or in a truck. I believe so, yes, ma'am. Yes, it's free. There are plans to toll it from Juarez to El Paso, from what I understand. And I believe that Fideicomiso de Puentes is, they are the counterpart to the city of El Paso. Fideicomiso de Puentes is the state of Chihuahua. They're the ones that are looking into that possibility on the Mexican side. So El Paso, just to give you some context, El Paso is a major player in the trade community and also movement of people and goods. We are second in personal vehicle crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border, second for pedestrians, and then third in cargo. So we're up there with San Isidro, with Otay, with Laredo. We're one of the busiest ports on the U.S.-Mexico border. There in 2018, more than $75 billion in trade passed through the city ports of entry, the majority through trucks, followed by rail, and then followed by air. This is showing you how connected the U.S. and Mexico are in terms of trade and also movement of people and goods. We're looking here at a graph showing on the top, on the top, we're showing since the 1990s, production in the U.S., employment in Juarez and maquiladoras manufacturing, and then also the number of crossings for trucks. And you see how the three lines follow each other. There's a lot of connection between El Paso and Juarez. And so we see that there's multiple events and outside forces that impact these figures and impact the local economies, both in Juarez and El Paso, like the peso crisis back in 1994, 1995, the Great Recession, and then also 9/11 and the recession that we had in the early 2000s. And we see that since the Great Recession ended, you see that continuous uptick of production in the U.S., followed also with the same behavior for implementing Juarez as well. And on the bottom graph, we're showing trade numbers or the share of trade between truck, rail, and air. And the majority of the trade that passes through the El Paso port is through the bridges, the city-owned bridges, and also BODA as well. We see that 88% of the exports are by truck, and then 87% of the imports by truck, like I said, followed by air and then rail. Here we're looking at the number of crossings between between Juarez and El Paso. So this is northbound crossings. This is data from CBP that we collect working with them, going back also to 1992. And then we have cargo, vehicle, and pedestrian crossings. You see sort of the cyclical pattern of the nature of the crossings for trucks. You see the downturn in the holiday seasons, and then it picks up again the first quarter of the year. So you see that up and down behavior. But you see that same uptick in crossings for trucks since the Great Recession ended. And then here overall, we see also how outside forces impact crossings, whether it's the exchange rate, Mexican violence, the recession, 9/11. So all these factors influence how the business sector behaves, and then also how just consumers and commuters also behave and how they cross. In the POV graph in the middle, you see that huge shock after 9/11 took place overnight. Literally, everything changed. The numbers dropped overnight, and you see that drop into late 2001. You see another drop after a mild recovery in 2005, 2006 when it peaked again, and then another drop with the Great Recession and the violence in Juarez. And then more recently, you see another drop in the middle of 2018 that was mostly pushed by the Mexican violence in Juarez that is on the uptick. And then also another hit in the spring of this year when we lost 184 agents to other communities going to assist with the crisis that we have with the asylum seekers. And so again, many outside forces impact how these numbers behave. And another interesting connection here that we have here is between POV and pedestrians. You see that drop in the middle of 2018, but you see an uptick in pedestrian crossings. So those are folks that are choosing to walk rather than drive and waiting in the car for 2-3 hours. They decide to lose the car, walk, and then ride the bus, get a ride share, other services to commute between Congress and El Paso. So it's just interesting to see how these figures change over time. So in 2014, the city of El Paso was one of 5 communities in the U.S. that applied for a program with CBP that allowed it to donate funds for overtime at the bridges. So this program was funded by the bridge users with an increase in tolls of 50 cents per car and 50 cents per axle back in 2014, early 2014. We were one of the first cities in the U.S. Now this program is widely used around the U.S. for seaports, airports, and bridges that allows nonprofits, other government agencies, or private sectors to donate funds to CBP to have more officers, provide more overtime hours, and then open more lanes and reduce wait times. We were one of the first 5 cities in the U.S. to do this. And so with this increase in toll since 2014, 50 cents, like I said, we've been able to collect additional revenue that is now being used and put back into the bridge system. Bridges, for years now, for decades, it's been essentially a cash cow to assist with the general fund and provide other services like police, fire, libraries, potholes, parks, you name it. And so the majority of the funds that are collected through the tolls are used to assist with the needs of the city, and they are not reinvested back into the bridge system. But in 2014, the city changed that approach, and now we are using about $3 million a year being put back into the bridge system to assist with projects, with overtime, with improvements, enhancements. Again, all of it funded by bridges, by the use of the bridges, not by taxes or other users. And so one thing that I want to mention also is that since 2014, we've been spending less than we collect under P3, this new program, P3 program, which means that we have now money saved in the bank to pay for projects. Not only the immediate impact on bridge wait times by opening more lanes and having more officers at the bridges to reduce wait times, but also we want to be able to reinvest back into the bridge system at capacity, striping, improvements around the bridges, you name it. And so now we have also a CIP for bridges, not only on the U.S. side, but also on the Mexican side. And so in 2015, like I said earlier today, the bridges department underwent some restructuring. More resources were assigned to the department, and a different focus was taken with the way that the bridge department operated. And so since then, we've now established a bridges steering committee. And this is a group of stakeholders and agencies with the government working on projects, working on improvements, working together on scheduling, operations, IT systems, you name it. And so all these efforts have led now to state funding that was awarded to the city through TxDOT to fund many of these projects. This is one of a kind initiative that we underwent with the Bridges Steering Committee, and then also with the state delegation that helped us get that funding to put back projects at Boda and Zaragoza, and I'll show you some examples of those in a second. And so the last point here, the exchange of ideas and ongoing conversation is key to the bridge system. It sounds trivial to just talk to Aduana, talk to CBP, but it's crucial, especially in times of need like the asylum seeker crisis that we had in the spring of this year, when we now have a different schedule for Boda. We now close it on Saturdays, and we also close it early Monday through Friday to assist and send those agents to Zaragoza to help with the trade community. And that was an agreement that was done between CBP and the transportistas and the maquiladoras in Juarez. So again, working on these issues on an ongoing basis. There's many events that happen on a weekly basis, really. And so this committee has helped with that conversation and that dialogue. It sounds trivial, but it's really key to the bridge system. This is the list of the stakeholders that are part of this group, the Bridges Steering Committee. We meet with them once a month. We have in this group nonprofits, government agencies, the actual bridge users and stakeholders, transportistas, maquiladoras, Southwest Maquila, CVP, IMIP, the planning office in Juarez, City of Juarez, Aduana, the county, UTEP. So it's a really wide mix of stakeholders that are involved in the bridge system and that can assist in selection of projects, in working on the projects, and like I said, operations, scheduling, things like that. So working with this committee, since 2015, we've now developed a CIP of projects for all bridges, all modes, both directions, both northbound and southbound. With this group, we went out to each of the bridge locations, each of the modes. So we walked the bridge, we rode in a bus, pretending to be a truck, crossing from Juarez to El Paso, El Paso to Juarez, to look at the extra machines, to look at the canine units, secondary inspection points, every single step in the process. We process mapped it. Now we have a better understanding what happens in a crossing, whether you're walking in a vehicle, in a truck. And so we did this with the entire group. Back in 2015, we did Zaragoza for cargos. 2016, we did Bora cargo. And then in the spring of 2018, we did vehicles and pedestrians. Like I said, this is not just on the US side, this is also on the Juarez side. So we have a full CIP of projects on both sides of the border for all bridges within the city limits. And this list is now more than 100 projects. You know, the city of El Paso, of course, does not have all the funding to pay for all this stuff, both in the US and in Juarez. And so working with this committee is even more important to be able to go after these initiatives to improve the bridge system. Breakdown of the projects. So we have PDN in Stanton, 20 projects within PDN in Stanton downtown, 48 at Bora, 47 at Zaragoza. And this is, again, across the spectrum of agencies, property owners on both sides. An example of these within PDN in Stanton, we have here the ones in green have been completed. The ones in blue we are pursuing now. So the ones in green is, I don't know if you recall, back in 2017, I believe, CVP created the Ready Lane program at PDN and then followed by Zaragoza and then Bora now. And so they split ready lanes on the left and then center lanes on the right for those users that do not have an RFID ready document with a paper, birth certificate, you name it. And so those crossers get split at the bridge, but back then we only had the dividers at the top, did not extend back into Juarez. And so one of the projects back then with this group is extending those delineators all the way into the tolling facility on the Mexican side, which now they've done now, working with the committee. And so now we have a full delineation of those 2 and 2 lanes between ready and standard from CVP all the way into Mexico. One minor project, but can assist, tremendously for those crossers that commute on a day-to-day basis. At Bora, 48 ideas, again, all the way from the US to the Mexican side, and also at the bridge. And this list is extensive. So we have one here, for example, number 5. You can barely see it here. It's kind of a small map. But on number 5, there's a right turn that trucks make to go from the 2 lanes at the bridge into primary on the right, which is now 6 lanes. And so there's an area that the off-ramp that creates a black hole on the US side within GSA property that is creating a bottleneck. So we are actually trying to pursue this project with Rider 44 with the state funding, working with the feds to extend the bridge approach a little bit to the right to have a better right turn and not have them bottleneck 2 lanes into 6. This is one thing that we're trying to work with the state and GSA to fund, to assist those truckers that make the right turn. Right now they're jackknifing essentially to pull into the farthest 2 lanes to the right. At Zaragoza, we have 47 ideas for improvements. Number 4 has been completed within City of El Paso. We have now an e-Fast Pass program, or the AVI tag. We're trying now to have more AVI dedicated lanes for vehicles to incentivize them to prepay in advance, get a discount, and reduce their wait times. So we have that in place now, both at Stanton and Zaragoza. We have also the UCP program, the Unified Control Processing Program with CVP, that allows Aduana agents to be co-located with CVP on the US side to inspect trucks. So those trucks that qualify within this program do not have to stop on the Mexican side. They essentially just pay the toll and then cross and go straight into primary inspection point to talk to both CVP and Aduana officers in one stop, one location. So that's helping those users to skip the queue on the Mexican side. And then I'll close with this slide. This is a new project we've just started about last month. So for the last 2 years now, we've been working with Colegio de la Frontera as a university, research university in Juarez and in Tijuana on this project. So we've always been asked, what is the impact, the economic impact of users of the bridge system that come back and forth and spend money in Juarez, Mexicans that travel to shop, dine, tourism, to work. We've always been asked, what is the true impact of those crossers? And the answer is we don't know. The data don't exist. So with this project, we're now doing surveys at the bridges on the Mexican side for pedestrians and vehicles, asking them, how often do you travel to El Paso? Are you coming to El Paso? Do you come to restaurants, to movie theaters, hotels, to events, concerts, trying to understand their behavior, and then also what is their contribution to the El Paso economy. We are also interviewing U.S. residents that go to Juarez to go see a doctor, go get medicine. How much money do you spend in Juarez? Because you all have to account for the leakage also of those users, the residents in El Paso that go to Juarez to visit and also to go to restaurants, you name it, do business. So we're doing this at all bridges, PDN, Santa Barbara, and Zaragoza, working with COLEF. It's their employees, so we're essentially funding the project, working with them, and their employees. You see the pictures here on the right, those interviewers talking to the drivers at PDN and Zaragoza. We're doing this Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night. So it's a pretty robust survey year-round. Usually surveys like this is just a one-time deal with snapshot of 1 month or a quarter. This is a year-round project with an option for a second year. And if it goes well, which we believe it will, we want to have it permanently. So we'll be able to track the cyclical patterns of the Christmas, the holiday season, spring break, and how that behavior changes, the way that the crossers use the bridge system. So that's a short survey. There's going to be a long survey also that we will be sending via email to those users, asking them more detailed information. Perhaps we can ask them if there's demand for a new flight from Juarez, from El Paso to Chihuahua, for example, or to other Mexican border cities. So we're trying to work with multiple departments within the city and other agencies to see what needs they have in this long survey to assist in whatever they need to have information collected from bridge users. With that, I can take any questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
On slide 6, we have toll revenues and P3 revenues. What are P3 revenues?
Good question. So let's look at 2018, fiscal year 2018. So in 2018, we collected about $24 million in revenue total from the bridge system, from those tolls, pedestrians, trucks, and vehicles. 3 of those in blue is that incremental 50 cent that we raised for the P3 program. So that funding can only be used for projects, for traffic control, and for overtime. So the money is set aside, put in the bank, and then we tap into it when we have needs for projects, for overtime, for traffic control, like I said. The other $20.9 million is being used to fund bridges. So we take about $6 million a year to fund the department, do maintenance, the operations, the lights at the bridges, striping, potholes. So that's about $6 million. So the other 12, 13, we then take that money and then send it to the city's general fund to pay for other services. So the majority we do lose to other needs throughout the city to assist with city services. Bridges is one of a few departments within the city that contribute more than we actually spent. Like the airport is another example of that. So the $3 million that you see in the top, that's the P3 money for projects. Yes.
Your steering committee a steering committee is very large. How often do you meet with that?
We meet with them every month on the first Thursday of the month usually. So this month, there was a summit last week with Jeb Bush that came. We had a conflict, so we pushed it back till tomorrow. We've had the meeting for the first Thursday of the month for the last 4 years since 2015. We've only canceled the meeting once, and that's when the Pope went to Juarez that same week. We just had to cancel the meeting because there was a lot of conflict and coordination that had to happen between both cities. But the meetings are really looking at projects. We very operational in nature. We don't look at, rarely we look at aspirational goals or political events. We focus on the actual needs of the bridge system. We have discussions about the scheduling. When the crisis came in with the asylum seekers, we had to rethink the way that CP operated the ports, both in Zaragoza and Santa Teresa. And so again, the discussions are very operational on the ground, kind of discussions to improve the bridge system. And we keep adding more and more groups to this. Most recently, we had a company, U.S. company, go to a meeting to see if they can donate technology improvements to CBP agents so they can detect counterfeit products to protect their patents on the U.S. side. So again, this is a really good venue for us to work with the federal government, the state government, and also local agencies on both sides to tackle these issues.
What's the organizational structure that you've got within your department? Do you have an organization chart online or something like that? I
don't think it's posted. So Bridges reports to the chief operations and chief operations officer with Civil Paso, which is Monica Lambaña, who also oversees the airport and San Metro now. Within Bridges, we have a relatively small staff, administrative staff, about 20 folks, administrative staff, toll operators, supervisors. We have a money room also at Bridges that collects counts the money, the cash that we take from the revenues, from the tolls. And then we have a small team of economists, about 3 of them, that are working on these projects. And then we have 40 plus employees running the actual booths, covering the schedules and the lanes that we have set to meet the demand for those peak times. So about 69, 70 full-time employees within Bridges.
So the management and planning for your functions, the focus of that takes place where?
Within physically, with
No, I mean, with what main body? Does that take place within?
Bridges are the permit, yes. Yeah, our offices are at Stanton, right next to the Sentry Bridge.
So airport and operations is oversight.
Mostly, yes, oversight of the entire department structure, correct. It's a small portfolio of 3 departments.
Thank you.
So, when the federal government reduced their CPP officers, did it impact your P3 contribution? Because I always thought that was like dictated upon them maintaining a certain level of support.
Yeah, so in 2018, when we created the CIP, the city council approved the CIP for 5 years. We simply could not sustain the overtime expenditures that we had in the past. In the last 12 months before the CIP was approved, we were spending about $2.6 million a year in overtime. That's about 1,600 hours of overtime every month for more officers at the Bridges. With the approval of the CIP, we had to cut back on the hours. We can't do both CIP and overtime. So we reduced that from 1,600 hours a month to about 1,000 a month. Okay. So we cut it substantially. So we had to cut hours at the Bridges, number of lanes open, to help use that funding, which is limited, to pay for these projects. That happened in December of 2018. In the spring of this year, the crisis started in March. They lost officers. And so the council at the time decided to offer additional support in overtime at the expense of projects because of the huge need that we had. They lost almost 200 agents. Wait times for trucks. We had trucks waiting overnight. Yeah. They had to sit there in the city streets in Juarez to cross the next day. We had hours of 4, 6, 7 hours for vehicles to cross to El Paso. And so the need was immediate. We offered additional support in overtime, funding for CP officers, and they simply declined. They did not have the officers either to take. They couldn't take the money, from the city. So we've had a set schedule since December 2018. Like I said, about 1,000 hours. We get invoiced once a month for the previous month, and so we review whether or not they met those 1,000 hours at schedule. If they did not meet, then we don't pay for those hours, so we pay as we go. They've canceled, from month to month, 10, 12 hours here and there. So they've been able to honor that schedule, but they simply cannot go beyond the approved hours that we have right now.
So do you have any major state or federal funds coming in for large CIP projects?
The only one that we have right now is Rider 44. There's $32 million that we have. Those two, that funding is being used at only Bogota and Zaragoza. That was part of the language within the rider that was approved by the state, by the Senate. And so it was approved in the last biennium, so we've been going at it for the last 2.5 years. And this most recent biennium, there was a carryover rider that addressed a lot of the issues that we had with the first rider that restricted our ability to use the funding. At the time, one of the issues was that the funding was only to be utilized within TxDOT's ON system roadways, which in the bridge system, it's less than ideal. There's a lot of properties in ownership, city right-of-ways, city property, federal property. And so we had to get that rider rewritten. In the last biennium, we did. And so now we're working with TxDOT. We're actually not drafting the agreement, the LAPAFA, that is going to allow the city to tap into those dollars and then work on the improvements within, the improvements off system, working with CBP and GSA, and then also city property.
Would you have any objection to adding a representative from the RMA to your committee?
No. So
Simply because we do funding across, jurisdictions for projects, and so particularly in your capital planning, there might be some opportunity.
Absolutely not. So, yes, so we're more than welcome to send 1 or 2 representatives from the RMA. Most recently, we added the county. Tornillo, Guadalupe, it's not being utilized at all, very little. They had to close the cargo operations shortly after the bridge opened. They had the ground opening because nobody's using the bridge. It's too far out. It's beautiful, state-of-the-art facility with no access on the Mexican side. And so, it's not being utilized. So the county wanted to work with us and the committee to find ways to also sort of, how can they start, use the brand new bridge. So the RMA is more than welcome to come to those
Great,
meetings.
thank you.
With Rider 44, we're working on adding devices on system and off system to track traffic, to track wait times via cameras, RFID readers, Bluetooth readers, Wi-Fi readers. And so those devices will be on the US side, funded by the state, on both state, local, and federal property. But that's only half of the crossing experience. So we are interested in using P3 dollars on the Mexican side to complete that system to track traffic, and then have a fully integrated wait time system, a counter system on both sides. We can't do that. The RMA can't do that, working with the city. And so that can be like a phase two to Rider 44 to work on the Mexican side of that project. So that's one potential project we can engage with the RMA, between the RMA and the city.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Do you know what percentage of overtime you were funding for CBP at the bridges?
Of the overall budget? No, we do not know.
Okay.
All we know is what we assist them with. The hours that they have now for the All Lanes initiative, they have their own program also where they staff all lanes, they open all lanes at all bridges during those peak times. We come on after, for the most part, right after that program ends to, again, sort of address that peak crossing time during the midday and then during the morning hours. So we track the hours that we fund, but their staffing, their hours, their operations, they keep.
Thank you. Do you have any major contracts for consultants that help you in the operational side of, planning side of things that you do?
So right now we have one that's active, that is helping us to work on this Rider 44 project. For the last 2 years, we've not been able to use that funding because of the restrictions of the rider language. So the city of El Paso took a risk and started funding part of the project on the on-system projects to advance that development using P3 dollars. Now that we're going to have the new LAPAFA agreement in place, hopefully before the end of the year, we'll be able to get that access to the funding and then use the rider funding for that. So that's on the rider. We do annual maintenance and inspections of the bridges, working with TxDOT as well. So we do have consultants on board that come in and help us to do the inspections of the actual structural soundness of the structures of the bridges. So on a given year, we do have quite a bit of projects, ongoing, whether it's striping, inspections, pothole repairs, lighting, cameras.
I'm mainly talking from the planning and management and operational side. Do you use any professional contractors, consultants to do that?
We do. Yeah, we usually typically access the rotation, the on-calls list that CID has with the city. Yeah, so we piggyback on their program.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your time, good presentation.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to go back to the order. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, we have Eduardo Calvo, who is the Executive Director. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry, consensus and making sure that we are prioritizing and being very smart in the way that we analyze projects, select projects, prioritize them, and more importantly, have consensus. So these meetings and I mean, these committees are so important. So a lot of kudos for David on that. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the MPO and the experience of the MPO participating in many mobility projects in the region. So let me start with that. First of all, some of the basics on the MPO. We are created by, MPOs in general are created by federal law. Any urbanized area with more than 50,000 people needs to have an MPO per federal law. MPOs coordinate all transportation planning activities, and we also program all the funds for projects that use federal and state money. And we follow the 3C process. The planning process has to be comprehensive, cooperative, continuous. The documents that we produce, you see them there. The UPWP is our work program where we establish the activities that MPO will perform for the next 2 years. The TIP, which is a programming document where we program all the funds for projects that are going to be implemented in the next 4 years. Then the MTP, which is our long-range plan, 20-plus year plan. And then the public participation plan, the congestion management process, which are important pieces of the planning process as well. And then everything that has to do with air quality conformity. This is the infamous conformity stuff that is such a pain for us to do because this region is considered being a non-attainment for air quality standards. What that means is that it adds a lot of process to the preparation of projects and implementation of projects. Again, it's something that the MPO takes the lead on that. It's not a lot of fun, but it is what it is. So our MPO, we cover all of El Paso County and some pieces of southern Doña Ana County. It includes all of Santa Teresa, the city of Sunland Park. We have a board. Our board is made up of 30 members. Raymond doesn't know how good he has it with having a board of only 7. I've got 30. So we've got all the elected officials in the region, well, all the municipalities, so representation, we've got the mayors, council members, but then we also have the two state delegations. That adds another dimension to the fun in the discussions at the board. Some appointed officials, the district engineers for Texas and New Mexico DOT, and the city also has, City of El Paso, has a couple of other appointed officials. The policy board, at the end of the day, makes all the final decisions. As staff, we prepare, we do all the technical work, we prepare the documents, provide recommendations, certainly, but at the end of the day, the policy board makes all the decisions. So wanted to talk a little bit about funding, because this is really the fun part of the job. The traditional funding mechanisms in Texas and in general in the country are all based in fuel taxes. So we pay a tax every time we pump fuel at the pump. Then it goes to the federal government, and then through a complicated process comes back to the states. In our case here in Texas, it goes to TxDOT, where state money is also added to the mix. Then the funding is distributed to the districts, MPOs, and we implement projects. Part of the money also goes to fund transit. A lot of the discussion on fuel taxes as a major way of funding. The federal tax of 18.4 cents hasn't been modified since 1993. The state tax of 20 cents, of which 5 goes to education, it's a good thing, but we only get 15 cents for transportation, hasn't been modified since 91. These taxes are fixed regardless of the price of fuel that we pay at the pump. These are nominal terms. In other words, they have not been updated even or adjusted for inflation. So every year we lose ground against inflation. And then Texas is considered a donor state versus a donee state, which means that we provide more money to the federal system compared to what we get back. I believe right now we get, I think it's about 93 cents for every dollar that we put in. So all of this, again, these are all challenges in terms of funding. Then we have the fuel efficiency, which is, for environmental purposes, obviously it's a good thing, right? But less gas means less, revenue for us from fuel taxes. So really the question is, what do we do? There's been a lot of chatter about other ways of funding transportation. But honestly, there really hasn't been a lot of really good and new ideas recently. So some of the history in the state of Texas, I think that Texas has been a leader in terms of finding innovative funding and financing mechanisms. Starting in 2001 with Senate Bill 342, and you see all the different bills through 2015. All sorts of really cool things, public-private partnerships, adding a lot of toll abilities to toll projects, pass-through financing, some of the debt that the state issued with Proposition 14, Proposition 12, and Texas Mobility Fund, but also very importantly for us, transportation reinvestment zones that the city of El Paso has implemented and we were able to use to fund projects. The county's vehicle registration fee, also very successful in this region. And again, kudos for the county of having the courage to be one of the few counties that decided to levy that additional fee. And then Prop 1 and Prop 7, which are also very successful at the state level in providing funding. But I think the key thing is that all of these tools that we have available for us, not all of them work all the time. For example, Prop 1 and Prop 7, as you will see, are based on taxes. They go with the economy, right? Right now, it's been great. Oil and gas is we're in a good time for that. So it represents a lot of revenue for us. One of the highlights, obviously, RMAs, and of course, I'm not going to get into this, but let me say that I'm a big fan of this RMA compared to the other RMAs in the region in the sense that we've been able as a region to use the RMA to implement projects in so many different ways. The typical RMAs, the flagship or, CTRMA in Austin, all they do is toll. I mean, they have it really good because they have, really good toll roads and financially they're in really good shape. However, we've been, very creative. And, this RMA has not only helped in the implementation of traditional highway projects, but toll projects, uh, bike share programs, trolleys. What am I missing, Raymond? Even the aesthetic project on I-10, the egg beaters that are obviously one of our features now here in El Paso. But again, the flexibility that this RMA really has in implementing projects. And so historically, well, let me just go through these really quick. The TRZs that we're all familiar with, the county's VRF, Prop 1 and Prop 7, again, at the state level, they are currently providing a good chunk of funding, which is all great. But again, especially Prop 1, they go with the price of oil, right? When I'm not sure that it's going to be a great thing when oil, drops to $30 a barrel. So all of the funding goes to TxDOT, and then TxDOT distributes the funding through 12 funding categories. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details, but that's sort of like the mechanism. Let me focus this. I love this map because it really puts El Paso in perspective. This is a map where you see the darker colors represent population. So you clearly see that the population at the state is concentrated along the I-35 corridor, starting from Laredo through San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. And then, of course, to the east with Houston. And then way to the left, to the west, we have El Paso County, right? So we're 550 miles away from Austin, from the state capital. So, and there's a lot of nothing between us and them. I think this is really important because it really shows how important it is for us to be communicating our message. Again, geographically, we're far away. So we have to be engaged in communicating and making sure that people in Austin and other places know what El Paso is and the importance that El Paso has, to the state. So also a little bit of history. Because of that, being so far away, back in 2007, 2008, after a period of having a lot of discussions internally here locally in the region, we came together. So using all the different funding tools that were made available to us, and also really getting all the key players involved and working together, the MPO, the RMA, TxDOT, the local governments, we got together and came up with the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, which really was an amazing plan where we were able to accelerate projects. It was a really good exercise in coordination where, again, the RMA played a very important role in implementing some of the key projects, again, working with TxDOT, the MPO, the city, and so on. And then in 2013, the county came on board with a 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, where the RMA obviously had a very important role as well in the development and implementation of those projects. In short, we built about close to $2 billion between 2010 and 2016. Of course, during this time, it certainly helped that we had Ted Houghton chairing the Texas Transportation Commission. But again, we were able to take advantage of the opportunities. And again, the RMA playing a very important role in providing that flexibility to do things quickly. So we are now in 2019, and we are in the process of developing the new CMP, we're calling it Mobility Plan Version 2019. We still need to find a good name for it, a sexy name that really carries a lot of weight. So the features of this plan is similar to the 2008 CMP. We're looking for it to be multimodal. It's not just about highways, multi-jurisdictional. Again, spreading the projects. I mean, there's different needs and a lot of needs, throughout the region. Really looking at cross-border movement of people and goods, which is so important for us as well. In other words, looking for projects that support the movement of people and freight cross-border. But like I said before, we need to emphasize on the regional priorities and consensus. In the last 5 or 6 years, I think the region, we've lost a little bit the ability to communicate clearly what the priorities are and having consensus. And that really hurts us when we go out and seek funding in Austin or other places. So one of the emphasis areas, and I've said it many times with the policy board of the MPO, is that we need to be able to determine and communicate clearly what the priorities are. And once we establish those priorities, everybody has to be consistent. The message has to be consistent, whether it's MPO staff, policy board, the mobility coalition, which is another element that is really another piece of the puzzle that we needed to have in the region. RMA, everybody has to be, the state delegation. We cannot have, different messages, having, individual groups or people asking for, different things. Everybody has to be lined up. Some of the inputs, the congestion management process, which is where the MPO identifies congested links. RMS, which is the regional mobility strategy, which is something that the El Paso District of Texas started, that is looking again as a result of that, identifying 4 keystone projects that we're going to talk about shortly. Certainly looking at the MPO partners' priorities. This is also very important. Regardless of how projects are prioritized and evaluated and all that, it is very important also to understand what the local priorities are for the city of El Paso, for the city of Socorro, Horizon City, and so on. We're going through an evaluation and prioritization process, but also really looking at project readiness. We're looking at projects that can be implemented in a 5 to 7 year timeframe. There may be other projects that may be, very good and all that, but if they're beyond that, where they're not ready for this mobility plan. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't continue the process to develop them. And again, to be able to optimize our current funding to show TxDOT administration, the commission, and others that we are using the money that we have available, that we're using it in the smartest way, that we're not just, spending money on projects just because we have the money there and all that. So that's a very important message. This is just a list of the candidate projects. I'm not going to go through them, but what is important, the ones that are highlighted in red, are projects where the RMA may have an opportunity to participate. The first one there with new Hueco Tanks extension for the city of Socorro. They are currently updating the TRZ that they already have established. TTI and, TxDOT is asked TTI to do that update. So there's an opportunity there for the RMA to help out with that project. Another for the city of El Paso, Arterial 1, which is a longer term. It's not going to make it for this mobility plan because of the time frame. But again, that's another opportunity that I see for the RMA. And with the county of El Paso, John Hayes, again, to continue the good relationship that the county and the RMA have had in implementing projects. For the TxDOT projects, Borderland Expressway, which is the bypass of Northeast Parkway on the Texas side and connecting to New Mexico 404 and 213 and through the Anthony Gap. That's another one that we've been talking for a while, and again, being another opportunity perhaps for the RMA. I was going to talk about the 4 Keystone projects, but I know Tomas in his presentation is going to talk about them, but I just want to go super quick on this. The downtown segment of I-10, that is, we believe is one of the most important or the priority projects for the region from a transportation perspective in terms of the need to rebuild pavement and structures. There's, of course, a lot of talk and chatter about putting a deck over that segment. So this is just a very early rendering of what it could be. Following the example of the Clyde Warren part that was built over a freeway in the Dallas area. Another project, what we call segment 3, 3 and 3B on I-10, similar to segment 2, where the need to rebuild the infrastructure is there. On top of that, there's a lot of operational issues, ramps that are too close together and all that. So that is also a very important project. Artcraft, this is El Paso's west side, I-10 at Artcraft. All that corridor will be looked at. That project has been funded recently, so that's really good news. 193 million that we didn't have before. Now we have the funding for that. The highlight is the adding or the improvements to the interchange of Artcraft and I-10 with direct connector ramps and the Borderland Expressway. Again, I'm not going to get into the details. I don't want to steal Tomas's thunder on that. And with that, that's all I have right now, and I'm happy to answer any
Great, thank
questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
The makeup of the MPO, the membership, is that statutory or is that, how is that established?
Well, that's established by bylaws. And so the MPO has bylaws that establish the membership that currently adds up to 30. So the bylaws establish, for example, that all the local governments need to have an elected official representing them. Could be the mayor, the mayor could name another elected official. In the case of the city of El Paso, historically, because of the vast majority of the population of the MPO lives within the city limits, the city of El Paso has a lot more members than anybody else. I believe it's 6. Well, it's 6. The bylaws call for 6. In addition to that, you have the director of Sun Metro representing transit, and Monica, who's representing the airport. So the city as a block, has 8 votes. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, in the last few years about maybe revisiting the composition of the board. It hasn't been easy. It's a very painful exercise, as many of you know. But to me, it is not one of my priorities right now. I think I'd rather work with 30, but making sure that everybody's informed so that we can have, consensus and be able to work together.
And has the RMA ever had a membership position on the board?
No, the RMA, in order for that to happen, the bylaws would need to be amended. And again, the policy board has a final word on that.
All right, so thanks a lot. I really appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. And so next we have Mr. Tomas Tomasino, the district engineer for TxDOT. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to El Paso, too.
Thank you.
Before you get started, I just want to make sure that everybody can stay for a while. We have action items, so I don't want to lose a quorum. Like that, we probably till noon, given what we're doing here. We have to leave? Okay. So, yeah, it's 10. Okay, so we've got 3 more presentations. So let's kind of limit our questions on these, and then maybe, can you stay to the end of the other 2, then maybe we can just wrap all the questions up at once and then move on to action items? Do you have to leave? Okay, but we can go down. Parking? Okay, we'll give you a break to go feed the meter if we run out of time. I just want to make sure we have enough time to take care of our action items without losing it. And I don't want to rush these because I think they're very good, so thank you. Thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. For the record, Tomas Trevino, District Engineer, El Paso, Texas Department of Transportation. So today's presentation is just a brief overview of where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. The El Paso District serves 6 counties, El Paso County being one of them, Hudspeth, Culberson, Jeff Davis, Presidio, and Brewster being the other. We have over 4,900 lane miles, service about 13 million daily vehicles a day, with a population about 1.1 on the U.S. And of course, we got Juarez and a number of other municipalities on the Mexican border that we service as well. Construction project-wise, we've got 4 major projects that are on the tail end of being wrapped up. We're doing final punch item lists. The GO-10 project was about 162 million. We're doing some final cleanup on that one. The I-10 mall braided ramp project, which is about 17 million, is on the tail end of being completed. Along with that, we have the 54 main lane project, which was a $35 million job up on the north side. That again is on the tail end of being completed. And finally, we have the Border West design build project, a $680 million job that just opened up here about a month or two ago. Ongoing construction projects, of course, we have the I-10 Connect job coming off I-10 that services the Boda crossing. We have some operational improvements, ramp reconfigurations that we're doing there. Total project cost is about 96 million. Have some asbestos issues we're dealing with right now. Total project length was about 2.5 to 3 years. We're about 1 year into it, so we're about 1.5 years to 2 years being out. Other major job is the Montana 62-180 project. It goes from Loop 375 to Global Reach. This project is about 121 million. It let last October with construction expected being wrapped up about spring of 2021. We've got a number of overpasses at Lee Trevino, Wooster, and George Dieter, and then an underpass there at Kleinfeld and Loop 375 frontage road improvements. Another project on Loop 375 services Zaragoza Port of Entry. This project's about 32 million. We're reversing some ramps. We're also building a bridge over the railroad to service our frontage roads. Project duration is about 18 months. We've got about 6 to 9 months being completed. Projects under development right now. Aside from our major mobility jobs, we have 56 projects in 2020 that we're working on, and another 113 in 2021. Complete listing can be found in the handouts that I gave you, or we can push them out to Raymond, and he can distribute them as needed. These projects are throughout the district. For 2020, we have approximately 231 million. For 2021, we have a little bit over 269, and that could change if we get additional funding, but that is what it is right now. Every one of our counties has a project, and the majority of them being along the I-10 corridor. Currently, we just let the Mesa project was just let, hasn't been awarded by the commission yet. It won't be awarded till they meet here later this month. But it's a $12 million job. It does a full reconstruction. So we're basically doing what we call a mill and fill. We're going in there, removing 10 inches of hot mix and replacing it in kind, just to get it back to optimum condition. Like I said, earlier this month. It won't be awarded till the commission meets later in the month. Next, we have later this year, we have Loop 375 from US 62 to 601. Its project cost is about 45 million. We'll be doing some frontage roads, adding frontage roads, and widening northbound and southbound main lanes. And again, we're supposed to let here around 2020, summer of 2020. Our fiscal year ends August 31st, so our new year, our 2021 year starts September 1st. So we are technically in 2020 for us. Finally, we have Loop 375 main lane widening from I-10 to Zaragoza. Again, this would add lanes to 375, going from 4 to 6, and then that project should let here again later this summer for a project construction cost of about 35 million. Finally, we have our I-10 project, which is not scheduled to let in 2020, but 2021. It's about $148 million job. Again, we're going from 4 to 6 lanes, essentially from Mesa to Trans Mountain, and then doing some operational improvements north up to the New Mexico state line. Total project cost about 148 million. Mobility plan, like Eduardo mentioned, we've been working with his group in identifying 4 major mobility projects. First one being Artcraft. Again, we do have the funding for this one. This includes direct connectors there at I-10, a couple of overpasses, and improving connectivity there at, between Doniphan and Trans Mountain, and then reconfiguring some of the ramps for some operational improvements. Total project cost is 193 million, and with project delivery set right now for 2024. Then we have the Borderland Expressway. Again, this connects I-10 to 375. This project is critical, I think, in being able to divert traffic if we have issues on I-10. It's ideal too if we ever decide to change the hazardous cargo route and get hazardous cargo off of I-10 onto 375. Right now, we have a project estimate of about 283 million. It is unfunded, but we continue to work on it through project development, corridor studies, and the like. Finally, segment 2 of I-10, which is the number 1 priority on I-10 as far as segment replacements. That is where we go from 8 to 6 lanes. We have no frontage road connectivity there. This also includes the potential deck plaza that Eduardo mentioned. Currently, the project costs are about 950 million. We continue to work on it. It is unfunded, but because we continue to work on it, we could possibly deliver this by 2024, 2025, if funding becomes available. As Eduardo mentioned, we have several parties interested in potentially doing a deck plaza. In our corridor study, we had some conceptual designs as to what those would look like. Those are included in your handouts. This would be third-party funding, but we could include it in the project costs or in the project contract if need be. Second section of I-10 that is been identified as a major priority is what we're calling segment 3, which goes from Copia to Airway. Again, it provides continuous frontage roads, major interchange there at 54, intersection improvements at Airway, Hawkins, Yarborough, and Zaragoza, and of course ramp modifications to improve the overall operational aspects of I-10. These projects are all ongoing as far as development, and the reason they're ongoing is because we do work up front, which includes our corridor studies. So we have a number of corridor studies that are ongoing right now, along with some that will be let here shortly as far as project development or corridor study development. Of course, the one I just finished mentioning is the I-10 corridor study, which is a 55-mile corridor study, which looked at all of the I-10 corridor, not just segment 2 and 3 that I mentioned. But segment 2 and 3 were identified as top priorities because of their operational inefficiencies and the lack of frontage roads through some of these areas. So that's why 2 and 3, priority-wise, an entire corridor study were deemed higher priority than, say, 1 and 4. So we're pretty much wrapping this corridor study up, moving into the NEPA process, and that's our timeline for where we've been on this corridor study for I-10. We also have other corridor studies ongoing. We have the Doniphan Drive, State Highway 20 corridor study. As you can see there, it started several years ago, 2016, and the last public meeting was completed in 2018. So these corridor studies are critical for project development, and as you can see, they take quite a bit of time to do. So Eddie Valtier and his staff do a very good job of identifying and getting projects in the hopper so that we can deliver as needed. But it all starts well in advance of when the need is actually there, so hats off to him and his group. Finally, next we have another State Highway 20 corridor study. The study has been completed, and again, this started back in 2016. This goes from Donovan Drive to Border Highway, a 10-mile corridor study essentially. We also have another one, Texas Alameda Avenue, State Highway 20 corridor study. We're awaiting the final report on this one, but again, it started back in 2018. The agency work group series wraps up here in the winter 2019. So we're just waiting the final report on this one. This goes down through Socorro, down to Tornillo. We also have one for Horizon Boulevard and FM 1281. Again, we're also awaiting the final report on this one. The last public meeting was here January 2019. Upcoming corridor studies, we have the North Loop, FM 76. We also have Montana, 62-180, Paisano at US 62, Donovan to Montana, and then the potential future outer loop. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, that was very good. Any
Thank you.
questions, anybody? Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good information. CRRMA. Well, let me ask. Ms. Hernandez and Mr. Alonso, could you give us a few minutes so we could jump and take care of our action items quickly? I don't want to hold you up unnecessarily. Would it be a problem? That way I don't feel so much that we're rushing to get through your presentations. Can you all go through these action items quickly? Okay, good. Thanks. So then let's just skip over to item 4 real fast, if you will. Presentation, discussion, and action on board resolution related to the CRRMA's recent procurement for Pelicano Drive widening project, which A, awards the project to the lowest responsible bidder, and B, authorizes the executive director to negotiate and execute a construction contract with such lowest responsible bidder.
Okay, Ray Mateus, Executive Director of the Camino Real Region Mobility Authority. So we'll go through this one pretty quickly. We've discussed this one in the past. We are talking about Pelicano Drive. We're going to talk about the project purpose, location, and scope, timelines, and bids received, and then I'm going to request some board action from you. So this project is an El Paso County project from the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. This one was let on November 5th and includes water improvements. The construction budget will come from federal funds primarily. El Paso County BRF will provide matching funds, and El Paso Water will provide funds for the construction of water improvements that are being requested by El Paso Water. We have an existing advanced funding agreement with TxDOT that has been executed in the total amount of just shy of $25 million, excuse me. And we will enter into agreements with El Paso County, El Paso Water, whereby the RMA will be responsible for construction management of the project. Management, of course, will be completed by the RMA through use of its general engineering consultant, as we normally do. This is the project roughly from Loop 375 over to Darrington, Berryville. And slow me down if you want to discuss any of this. This is what it's going to look like, similar to most of the other CMP projects, with all of the usual amenities included, raised median, concrete pavement, curb and gutter, sidewalk landscaping, safety illumination, storm drainage, signing, and striping. The roles of TxDOT in this one, so this one's a little bit unique in that we do have a role for TxDOT on this one because of the federal funding. They provide oversight for the project. And so that's TxDOT's role in this particular project. The role of the county in this one is to provide a local match through their vehicle registration fee program. And they will also, of course, provide owner decisions and input as project issues arise. Since they will be the ultimate owner of the project, El Paso Water will be similar. They will provide construction funding for the water, sanitary, sewer components and provide input as the ultimate owner during construction. The RMA has prepared and let the project for construction, and we will provide construction management services throughout the project. Here's a timeline. What's important to note is that November 5th, the bids were open. 5 were received as responsive bids. Today, we're seeking authorization to negotiate and enter into an agreement with the low bid contractor, which we will talk about next. December, we're hoping to come back with agreements with El Paso County, El Paso Water, the design engineer, and the general engineering consultant, which will wrap up all of the different components needed to complete this project. And we're hoping to begin construction in January. That's an aggressive schedule, but it's doable. Looking to start again in January. Standard work week, Monday through Friday, 399 working days is what we're looking at. Weather days, of course, will be credited, and we're looking at a possible completion in summer of 2021. These are the bid results. JAR was the apparent low bidder with a bid of $21.6 million. You'll note the engineer's probable cost of construction was 28.5, so it was quite a bit lower than the engineer's estimate. And you can see the remaining four bidders as well. And all of this was provided to you as part of the backup as well. And these, in fact, all of our PowerPoints as normal will be added to the website after today's meeting. So in terms of action, we're looking for two things. We're looking for one board resolution to select JAR Construction, Inc. as the lowest responsible bidder for the Pelicano Drive widening project, and also to authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute a construction contract with JAR, Inc. for the Pelicano Drive widening project. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval of this item.
Have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 5, is that everything on number 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution to authorize the executive director to execute an amendment to work authorization number 23 with Atkins North America, Inc. to update the Border West Expressway traffic and revenue study.
Thank you. This item, you may recall, we've discussed a couple of different times. This relates to the Border West Expressway project. As you will recall, TxDOT originally developed what's called a traffic and revenue study. This is a study that is developed before the development of a toll project. What it does is it projects out the number of vehicles that are going to use the facility, and then eventually also the revenues generated against the costs to operate the system.
Did TxDOT give us the okay to do this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
So-
that's come about since our discussions?
That's exactly right. So
Okay.
we met with the executive director of TxDOT and requested an update to the traffic and revenue study. They have approved it. They've looked at the scope and the fee, and they've approved that as well. So today you have before you as item number 5, a work authorization with Atkins, which is our general engineering consultant team. They will bring on the team that did the original traffic and revenue study, and they will update it with newer information. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval of this item.
So this is only for the section that's just been done, that's still subject to toll for the time being, right?
Correct, the Border West Expressway
And I
specifically.
assume it's gonna factor in the impact of like untolling the other piece?
Correct. It will remove Cesar Chavez. It will actually utilize the tolling data that we have for the 3.5 years when Chavez was in operation. It'll factor in the fact that Medica's management lanes will no longer be a facility, and all of the latest vehicle counts that we have. In fact, I've shared with the board the vehicle counts that we have for Border West to date, actually up until I believe it was last Monday. So we'll factor those numbers in as well, and they will be part of this update.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Any
ma'am.
other discussion, questions? Entertain a motion?
Second.
I have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Motion passes. Thank you. So item 6, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute the following amendments as they relate to additional design services requested by the Texas Department of Transportation. A, amendment to work authorization number 2 with ACOM for the State Loop 375 Frontage Road Ramps Project, and B, amendment to work authorization number 3 with Dannenbaum Engineering Company, El Paso LLC for the State Loop 375 Main Lanes Widening Project.
Thank you. This project, actually, both of these projects were touched on by Mr. Trevino when he was discussing the Loop 375 projects down near Zaragoza Port of Entry. Many of you will remember this PowerPoint. I bring it back to you each time we talk about one or both of these projects, as it gets very complicated very quickly. Very briefly, though, the overview really amounts to it really goes back to the Americas Managed Lanes. So many years ago, TxDOT provided funding to the Regional Mobility Authority for us to develop the environmental and preliminary engineering work for the Americas Managed Lanes, which was originally intended to be an extension of the Cesar Chavez managed lanes from basically Zaragoza up to almost the I-10 interchange. The idea was that the Americas Managed Lanes would widen to the center, just like Chavez had done before. So that's the Managed Lanes project. TxDOT later then expanded the scope for that work to include braided ramps and extension of the frontage roads. As you'll notice out in that area, there's a railroad that cuts under 375, and there's no frontage roads that cross over that railroad, as well as there's a canal as well. So the expanded scope included additional braided ramps and frontage roads, and actually moved and changed some of the access and exits along 375 as well. TxDOT then later provided funding for the final design, the PS&E, of two distinct projects that were to be pulled out of that preliminary engineering and environmental work. And it consisted of the main lane widening, which is really the core of the managed lanes project. And then this second project, which consisted of the frontage road ramps, which were the braided ramps, the extension of the frontage, and that sort of thing. So we were then tasked with developing PS&E for both of those projects, which were ultimately coming from the Americas Managed Lanes preliminary engineering work. Here's the project limits. Here's a breakout of the two distinct projects. The green, of course, is the widening to the center, which are the main lanes project. And the blue and red are the changing of the ramps, adding of frontage and the like. So we're going to skip through some of this. Ultimately, what we're looking for today, and is read into the record under item 6A and 6B, are additional amendments to the design services requested for each of the two projects, the frontage road ramps and the widening projects. The fronting road ramps is now under construction, as was referenced by Mr. Trevino, but the original design package included a larger scope than TxDOT's construction funds actually could cover. So what we've had to do is remove some scope from the frontage roads project and repackage it into the main lane widenings project. So essentially what you're seeing here under 6A and 6B is a repackaging of these design plans. And we also have Edgar Fino from our general engineering consultant team. Should you have any technical questions, I'll ask him to approach the podium. Here's a listing of the various amendments we've had to date. All of these have been in coordination with and approved, mainly requested and certainly approved by TxDOT, as TxDOT is the funding source for each of these amendments. You'll see this would result in the fifth amendment to the AECOM project under AECOM design agreement under the frontage road project. And this will result in amendment number 2 for Dannenbaum on the main lanes widening project. So subject to your questions, then I would recommend a motion to approve board resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute the following instruments. We're looking at amendment number 5 to work authorization number 2 with AECOM for additional design services on the State Loop 375 frontage road ramps project, and also an amendment to work authorization number 3 with Dannenbaum Engineering for additional design services on the State Loop 375 main lanes widening project. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval of this item.
You don't have any questions? Any concern? Entertain a motion?
I'll make that motion. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, great. So the last item, number 7, is the last item where you need an action, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so if you would take us through that, then we can go back to our presentations.
Yes, ma'am. If you'll read the assignment to the record,
Okay,
I'll
I'm
ask
sorry.
Mr. Fino to.
Presentation, discussion, and action on the following items related to the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. A, change orders recently approved by the executive director. B, board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a project contribution agreement. with ROP Eastlake River Oaks Asset Management, Inc., related to Eastlake Boulevard Phase 1 project. And C, board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute change order number 11 with J.D. Abrams LP related to the Eastlake Boulevard Phase 1 project.
So I'll give this one a shot. Normally, we have our general engineering consultant team handle this, but I will try to get through this as quickly as I can so we can get back to the presentations. So as you know, there's a board resolution that authorizes the executive director to approve certain change orders under $100,000. There were two provided that I come back to the board at the very next meeting to present those change orders that were executed. We have two of those in that category. We also have one change order that is in excess of $100,000 and requires board action today. The first one is through the Vista Del Sol project. These are the prior, then this PowerPoint, of course, follows the format that we've developed throughout the years. Stop me if you want to discuss any of these prior change orders. Number 19 was approved. As you know, the resolution also requires me in instances where a change order is in excess of $50,000, I have to let the board know right after I've executed it. So you did receive an email on this one. This change order was $92,000 and it was approved. And you see the total change orders to date under VRF and water. East Lake Boulevard. This is a split one. You'll notice change order number 10 is in the amount of $965. That one was approved by me and has been executed. Number 11 is the action item that we'll be looking for today. This one relates to a developer's request along East Lake, River Oaks in particular. They own land in that area. They've asked for certain improvements, including additional traffic lights, a deceleration lane, and certain improvements that are required over a drainage facility. That total change order, which we've asked the contractor for to cost out, is $382,210.23. Now, because it is a developer request, we have provided them with a draft project contribution agreement in which the developer would pay 100% of the cost for these improvements. And in fact, actually, we've added a 15% contingency on top of that, and they've provided those funds as well. So I've mentioned the types of improvements that would be added, the $382,000. There is an additional contingency amount that we've added to that in the event that there are cost overruns for the completion of this additional work. And the County of El Paso, of course, has reviewed and approved of this particular change order. The project contribution agreement has been included in your backup as well. Should you have any questions, we can go through that. So what's happening today then, through the agenda, is actually two items. There's a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a project contribution agreement with River Oaks related to this particular change order. And then the subsequent item, which would be 7C, is the actual board, a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute change order number 11 with our contractor, who in this case is J.D. Abrams. And that's what
On
you
the
see
ones
before you.
recently approved, do we have to ratify those?
No, ma'am. Those are
Okay.
for information
Just
only. This is
information
the only one that requires action, and it's the board action before
Can
you.
we take them together? Do you want
Yes,
them
ma'am.
separately? So we
Together
can
is
take B
fine.
and C together?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any discussion or questions about either of these? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, good. So that motion passes as well. And so that gets us through all of our business.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good. So that we feel bad. Okay, so now we're going to go back to item 3, and we're going to do 3C, which is El Paso County Transportation Division. Sal Alonso, Sal? Thank you. Thanks for waiting a few minutes for us.
No
I
problem.
really appreciate that.
Good morning, Chair and board members. Sal Alonso from the Planning Development Department, Transportation Division. Just in case you were wondering, yes, I'm trying to look like Raymond.
Now, what is this?
But in reality, I am trying to disguise myself with all these ongoing construction projects in the Far East Side
in the county with the East Lake and Mission Ridge and soon to be started with Pelicano. I am not going to be the most interesting man in the world. It's going to be the most wanted man. It's going to get quite busy out there. So thank you for having us. And go ahead and just press the button. Sorry. Just to give you a quick summary of what the county transportation does, providing a quick portfolio on the overall projects that we've done currently, have finished, and also all the partnership that we've had great success with the RMA and their GEC. So I do want to start off by thanking Mr. Dez and Robert for their support and the great relationship we've had since we started this back in 2013. As you could see in the presentation as we move forward, there were a lot of projects that were done on time, scheduled, and under budget. So I want to thank again the board and the Army. So this is just a quick overview of our transportation division. It kind of focuses on three items: aviation, and that's our within our Fabens Airport in Far East El Paso. From there, we do take advantage of the RAMP program, which is the Routine Airport Management Program, which is run by TxDOT. And it's an annual grant that we always we apply every year. It's a 50-50 match. The other projects that we have ongoing is the Business and Development Plan. We started this almost a year ago, and we're wrapping up this business plan at the end of this year. The reason for this is the county and Commissioners Court have been very supportive of the airport on the last probably 2 years. So they want to see the airport grow into a bigger G3 airport. But by doing that, we secured some funding from TxDOT Aviation to hire a consultant to give us like a roadmap on where we need to go in the near future. And that's what the business and development plan would be providing the county. The other funding mechanism that we've also received through TxDOT Aviation is for our airport capital improvement plans. This project, this is the first capital improvement that the county has had at the airport in probably over 15, 20 years. This is set to begin, I'm looking at probably fall of this year or early 2020. And this would include the rehab of our existing runways, new striping, some security fence, some gates, and some new illumination for the airport. The most recent one that we partnered up with the RMA is the County and Zoning Authority, which is something that the county, as you know, counties don't have authority except for, we do have some zoning authority around the airport. And the reason for is because of the investment that the county is currently doing at the airport. We just want to make sure that as development occurs around the airport, we don't have anything that would kind of impede the threshold of the landing from our planes and what we want to grow the airport. So that is very important to the county to establish some sort of zoning. That project is also currently being worked with the RMA and their consultants, and that should be wrapping up early 2020. The other portion that we also do in transportation in our division is long-range planning, design, and construction management. We go from funding mechanisms to grant to submitting whatever is needed to get projects in queue at the MPO or through TxDOT. So we handled all those mechanisms. As far as we also do project and development and progress on all of our projects. The last component that we also do under the transportation is the transit component. We currently don't have anything with the RMA under this, but that's soon to change here in the near future. We will be partnering up with the RMA as we move forward and we secure more funding, especially for our bus shelters that we currently don't have, but we're going after some real discretionary funds at the beginning of this year. We do have some planning documents, funding that we secured through TxDOT division, as well as a planning document for the air transit component. We also provide a fan pool, which is run by our vendor Enterprise. Has been a great asset to the county because of the ridership that we have. We started off with, when we had a new vendor, about 20 vehicles. We're up to almost 90 vehicles. So we covered a great portion of West El Paso, a lot of military, and also the Border Patrol. So it's been a great program that the county has have provided funding through. Just a quick glance of our partnership. As you can see, we partnered up with quite a lot of agencies, Horizon, UTEP Socorro, of course, the RMA, the MPO, and TxDOT. Just to give you a quick rundown on how the county got here, back in 2013, you recall the Commissioners Court approved an additional $10 vehicle registration fee. From there, we were able to partner up with the RMA to be able to handle these funds per the interlocal agreement. Since then, we've had two separate bond series, one in 2015 for about $72 million, and that pretty much funded all the 2013 CMP projects. And then in 2017, we were able to go back and issue a second bond for a total of about $35.4 million on these two bonds. Our ongoing projects, as far as we go with long-range planning, is the first in the county's history, the County Master Thoroughfare Plan. We started this transportation journey. We knew what we needed here in the next couple of years, but we didn't have anything in place 10 years, 15 years, or even 20 years down the line. So that was something that we had presented to Commissioners Court, and they were very supportive of this Master Thoroughfare Plan. So we were able to secure some local dollars from the Commissioners Court to allow us to secure a consultant. And again, this is another project that we partner up with the RMA to assist us on getting a local consultant to be able to perform these Master Thoroughfare Plan. And what this Master Thoroughfare Plan will do is kind of give us a roadmap for the future, not only for roadways, but also we're accounting for all types of multimodal, whether it's transit, trails, sidewalks, and of course, our roadway network. One key is we have reached out to all the abutting agencies, City of El Paso, of course, TxDOT, Horizon, Socorro, because we wanted to make sure that our Master Thoroughfare Plan blended in with the abutting agencies. And also we went a little bit step further and we met with several local developers to see what they had in the queue as development occurred, especially in the Far East El Paso. We want to make sure we captured everybody's opinion and comments as we move forward with this Master Thoroughfare Plan. And that's scheduled to be wrapped up, I would say, early 2020. Of course, the other one I had previously mentioned is the Pavens Airport zoning study that is underway, and that's the one that I just finished kind of giving you a little brief description about. Major roadway construction and design. Currently, we have East Lake Phase 1, which is a 3-mile stretch from I-10 all the way to Darrington. It would be widening to a 6-lane divided roadway. As Mr. Tellez had mentioned, you'll see your typical 5-foot bike lanes with buffers, sidewalks, hike and bike trails, landscaping, raised median, and illumination and drainage infrastructure. That is set to be completed early 2020, figured about May 2020 or so. Next project that is in queue, which will be what we call, I guess, like a shovel-ready project, would be Darrington. The key on this project is because the Darrington, if you're familiar with this area, is the only north and south connection from Pelicano to East Lake currently. But because of this, there's no alternate. So we would go under construction, we would really bottleneck the entire area. So we started with another project, which is the fourth project down, which is the Mission Ridge Boulevard Phase 2, which is a small segment pending that would connect the Pelicano portion all the way down to East Lake. So once this portion is complete, now we will have a full major arterial that would connect from Pelicano all the way down to East Lake. Once this occurs, then at that point, we will be able to release Darrington project for construction to provide an alternative route for the residents of Horizon City and then also for the surrounding community. The next project is Pelicano, the item that was just presented previously for action. This one is set to begin January 2020. This is a 3-mile stretch, similar to East Lake, concrete, landscaping, parkways, illumination, drainage infrastructure. This is going to be one of our second largest next to East Lake projects that would be getting started. And of course, with all these projects, we hate to do it, but sometimes they have to overlap. So as TxDOT knows, very familiar, they like to release several projects at a time. So we kind of took a page from TxDOT. So I'll be doing pretty much the same thing. So we'll have a lot of congestion in that area. But of course, the end result would be really nice commute for commuters and a lot of connectivity in the area that is highly needed. Two other projects that we're about to begin design is the John Hayes street design. This is a 3-mile stretch that would run from Pelicano all the way up to Montwood. This is the first north and south connection from a street north of Pelicano. Currently, the only way to get to the Montana Vista, Montwood area from Horizon is everybody would have to go up Darrington, which is not really fully developed. It's under design. And then you would take Pelicano, head west, and then go on to the loop, and then Zaragoza. As you may know, Loop 375 and Zaragoza are heavily used. This roadway extension of John Hayes will provide a great reliever in the area. So we're excited about this project. We've gotten the support of TxDOT and the MPO to move forward with this project. Funding has been identified, so we're hoping to get the design started here in the next few weeks.
Are these projects going to be done with the owner? Are these projects going to be done with the owner?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I basically all these projects that we're talking about are all the partnership on that. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. The new project that we just have met with one of our consultants, which is next in line in the IDC, is the Rojas Drive Phase 2. This is more of a geometric improvements and realignment. There's a portion of Rojas that we finished about a year ago, which is the one that we widened to 6-lane divided concrete. This is the east portion past East Lake. Back several years when it was approved, it was designed very narrow, so the lanes within this are only about 10-foot lanes. It's very tight in this area. We have a lot of industrial that is about to get constructed in that area, and semi-trucks going down there. There's really not much space, so we're looking at widening the actual roadway to give them at least 12-foot lanes and kind of provide more of safer routes for the community and for the semi-trucks that we expect to be in this area. The other projects also that have partnered up with the CRRMA is our aviation at the airport. We currently are working on getting a consultant to get our hangar design. We currently only have one hangar. It's currently being used by a partner, UTEP, for their testing of rockets for their space program. So the need for hangars in this area is highly needed, not only for ourselves, but for other local pilots that have recognized that we've lost a big asset in the airport because we leased the only hangar. So we're working with the CRRMA and our consultants to be able to get some hangar designs and hopefully get some built as early as summer of 2020. The other enhancements we're also doing at the airport is, of course, is a monument entrance at the airport, as well as a diesel lane off of Fabian's Road to provide a safe entryway, and then enhancement entranceway to the airport. Currently now, it's just a paved road with no landscaping, no shoulder, no sidewalk. So again, because the county is investing in this airport, we wanted to make sure we could bring up the current standards of what is out there right now at the airport. This next slide is kind of gives you a big picture on where we're at currently since 2016 when we started this 2013 CMP. Shortly after that, we started designing on, as you can see, about 8 projects, pretty much all at the same time, roughly. Um, and since 2016, we were able to complete several of these projects, just to mention a few, which is the De Nuevo Hueco tanks, the Vista del Sol, East Lake Phase 2, and then the Greg and Edgemere. But as you could see, it was 9 projects that were all done on time and under budget. And this is, again, goes back to the great relationship that we have with the RMA and assisting us on these big scale projects as well with our working with our partners with the City of Socorro, Horizon, and TechStop for these projects. In the Horizon, what we have planned are additional design roadway projects. One is the Tierra de Este Road design, which is another north and south that we take you from Pelicano up to Cozico, Tierra de Este, which ties into the city of El Paso. We're also looking at Bob Hope Drive extension that would take you from Loop 375 to Mission Ridge. This has become, I guess, one of the hot, roadways for us currently because about a year ago, maybe 2 years already, SISD had passed the big bond, and SISD is looking at constructing a new SAC right next to the existing sports activity center that they have out there off of Loop 75 and Bob Hope. But because of this new facility that SISD is working on, it's just going to generate more traffic. With the growth in this area, new schools coming in, we felt that extending Bob Hope all the way to Mission Ridge would provide another reliever for this area. This other project that we also have is a partnership that we're working on currently. We're trying to still work with the scope of work with UTEP. And also, this would be an item that in the near future would be presented through the RMA as another partnership, not only with the county, but now with UTEP. And I went over a lot of projects, so this kind of gives you like an overall glimpse of all the projects that we've discussed. Just to name a few, I think this is one. This slide has been presented to you by Mr. Diaz and his staff on most of our projects already, to kind of gives you a big picture of what is under construction, what is down the pipeline, and so forth. So it's just like a quick little overview of all our projects. Just to give you a couple of just pictures of our projects that we've completed up to date. The first one being the Mission Ridge Boulevard Phase 1. That opened back in fall of 2016. This was about a mile stretch. And this goes from Pelicano 1 mile south. From there, it just dead ends. And the reason for is we hadn't secured any funding, or we were still needing a right-of-way. But since then, we were able to work with the local developer to secure the right-of-way needed, and then also we secured additional funding to be able to build this last segment of Mission Ridge, which will provide, as previously mentioned, a nice reliever for this area that we will connect you from Pelicano all the way down to East Lake. This was one of our most current projects that we just finished completing. We opened to the public October 2019. Again, this is a good partnership with not only with the RMA, their GEC Atkins, but El Paso Water Utilities. There has been a pattern, as you can see with all of our projects. We reached out to all the utilities ahead of the game just to make sure that they were aware of what the county was doing, because one thing that we didn't want to do is construct a roadway and then 6 months later being torn up by utilities because of infrastructure. So we had a lot of planning ahead to be able to work with, especially with the Paso Water Utilities or the Paso Este Mud in that area, to make sure that if they had any plans of installing any water or sewer, that they work with us to be able to get their system in place before we come in with the major improvements. And up to now, I think we've done a great job with all of our projects, having them to provide stub outs. So for future development, you're not seeing road cuts every other 100 feet or so forth. So we took the same approach from this first project for Mission Ridge all the way to Greg and Edgemere, to Vista del Sol, We've done that for Mission Ridge Phase 2, and we're also doing that for our Pelicano project, so. Another project that we also completed last year was the Camino Real National Historical Trail. This was just a wayfindings from county line to county line, from Anthony all the way down to Sun Alley, just to give you, provide the National Historic Trail in the area. This kind of gives you a glimpse of it. It's not official, but something that, because of the presence of the airport, with UTEP's present at the airport and the partnership that we've worked with UTEP, we're looking at renaming the airport. And again, this is just very hasn't been set in stone. It hasn't been approved by Commissioner's Court yet. But just to give you an example of what we're looking at trying to build at the airport, will be a partnership. And right now, it's just a County University Airport at Fabens, Research Park, gives you with both of our logos. And this would be one of the projects that the CRRMA is working with us, as well as the diesel lane at the entrance. So just kind of gives you a little what is in the horizon in the airport. And that wraps up my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Everybody okay?
Sound like a question.
Yes.
You mentioned 2 bond series that you had sold. Do you anticipate a subsequent bond series, and do you have a rough estimate of what the funds might be that come from that future series?
I don't think we have anything planned in the horizon. I think all the money that we were able to get from these bonds have been tied up all the way to 2044, 2045, roughly. So how we've been able to move other projects and be able to get projects in design and queue, whereas because again, the great effort that we've done ahead to be able to make sure that when we're going to design, we capture any hiccups, any delays, anything of that nature, to be able to save some money. And we've done a great job in I think all of our projects, and to be able to save a little here, a little save here, and then kind of combine that pot to be able to use it for a shortfall on a construction project, or maybe save up to be able to do another roadway design. So, but to answer your question, no, we currently don't have anything in the near future.
So as the county looks to the future, and they've had such success and great partnership with the RMA building projects, and now you're looking at a master roadway plan. You talked about getting approved early 2020 at the Commissioner's Court level.
Correct.
Is one of your big unanswered question is, how do we build future projects, or is that not
What?
a problem?
No. Funding is always a problem. I wish we had a go-to ATM to get money out, but we don't. The closest one I have is Calvo. I'm always asking for money, but no. The county have some of these projects that have been identified, that will be identified in the county master thoroughfare plan. We had maybe 2-3 years ago already had worked with the MPO and textile local agencies to provide, to create the Destino 45. So a lot of our projects that we had looked at had been previously identified. Those projects, and I think it was about 6 projects, which is the Bob Hope, the Tierra, the John Hayes, the Tom Mays Wrestler Extension, the Darrington Widening Project. All those have been identified in the 2045 Destino and have been identified with federal funding. So to answer your question, as we move forward, we would continue to seek federal funding, but also the Commissioner's Court has also been very supportive of transportation since we started. And one of the items that we keep on stressing is we're trying to, I guess, put ourselves in a position similar to TxDOT and having shovel-ready projects. Because at the end of the year, just happens, money falls from the sky, and it's always who's ready to go out the door. And in previous years, we had not even a clue, or not even a schematic ready to go. So because of that, the court has looked at possibly providing some general funding at every budget year to be able to at least have enough funding to design a project. So in the hopes of, if there was some funding that comes available through the MPO, we'll be able to go in there with their approved environmental, the design schematic, and the whole 9 yards to be able to compete with those federal dollars.
Anything else? Okay, we're gonna take a 2-minute break so people can feed the meter and I get a ticket. And then we'll have Ms. Yvette Hernandez get ready to come up. Thank you. Thanks for waiting too.
Come. Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Brandon, this one you need to pass it. Will you make sure we get it and send it to us before the retreat next week? So we have all this. Sorry. Oh, I understand. That's okay. Is it something? Maybe we could tell this story. I was thinking Tuesday, but I think because we can, yeah, I mean, we can fund these projects, not one.
Well, how are you? Heather, how are you, Justin? How are you? No. I had 2 minutes left. There you go. Wow. Really? Well, good presentations. Thank you. What happened? Yeah, I think, absolutely, from a big picture standpoint, it's great. I'm still trying to understand a little bit the fear of, I mean, I get it. So you only have so many cars that are registering and you pledge the income and so on. And if there's not growth on the vehicle registration side, then you can't sell additional bonds. You already pledged the income there. But what's curious is when you show all the projects that have been built, I mean, it's a meaningful gap in life. I mean, big time, right? Although, I think the answer to your issue is, you guys have projects that are probably in a better position to capture the textile project that comes through, right? I mean, that's the. Just starts getting people. Good. Yeah. All right. Well. He said he was trying to keep his savings and put it into other deals he was doing. That's interesting. That'll you guys work.
I play for projects.
Okay, we're ready.
Yes, ma'am. Of course. And I know we're near the end and you added quarters to the meter, but let's try and keep it to 10 minutes and see how that goes. There we go. I'm glad we made mention of the art piece on I-10, actually fond of it, and it's a great complement to all the work that the airport is doing with the improvements and really providing that aesthetic gateway. So I'm going to go over planning, some of the priorities, touch on what Eduardo already made mention of, give you a recap of projects we've completed in fiscal year 19, and also the active projects that we currently have ongoing. So if you've seen this, this is the UTP for 2019. There's been a lot of recent discussion, whether you've heard it from City Council, from our delegation, and just sharing, getting our fair share of the funding. If you'll notice, what was forecasted for this year was 48 million. What was released in August is the 85 million, which is great. There's an increase. But if you've noticed, there was to the total at the bottom of the state is 70 billion. So there was an increase of 7 billion. When we see that discrepancy, there is some need for discussion. So I bring this up because it really ties into what the MPO is doing and Eduardo about really defining what our needs are. How can we holistically look at the transportation network regionally? And that is, I appreciate, Raymond, when you asked for us to present, one of the questions was, how can the RMA help us? So I know that in partnership, we've been working with the city, county, MPO, TxDOT. I know TxDOT has hired consultants for their RMS, their regional mobility strategy. The MPO has updated their comprehensive mobility plan, and then also with the mobility plan of 2019. So I just kind of read through chapter 370 and just to reinforce, I mean, what you guys are already doing, but just to study and evaluate the transportation projects, support the activities, study the cost and feasibility of transportation projects, maintain a feasibility fund, and promote transportation projects. So really along the lines of what the MPO has been saying, just that one vision, one voice, so that TTC really understands that we have a good grasp of what our needs are and therefore how can they be funded. So that translates into our local government priorities. How do we free up money? I know we're looking regionally at the projects. What can we move out into later years? How can we get some projects funded? And so what the city has provided in our priorities are railroad widening. That's from Purple Heart to Shrub Oak. Sean Haggerty Extension, that's building a bridge over the Greenbelt Levee, connecting neighborhoods in northeast El Paso. Rojas widening complements what the county has already done from Loop 375 to Bill Burnett. Hawkins Extension from North Loop to Alameda. And then at the UPRR, Union Pacific Railroad crossing from Alameda to North Loop. And so you'll look within the NTP, Sean Haggerty is listed twice, so 3 of these projects already listed in the MTP, but they're related into outer years. So how do we move these up to get funded? Completed projects, so we had projects citywide that were completed this past year to include Isela Rubacabra, that's the extension to Spur 16. The roundabout at Richbeam and Edgemere, which the city is CID portion, not the federally funded, is also creating a complementary one down the road. Downtown wayfinding, this is to really expand upon wayfinding that was currently existing to really bring in that economic development for downtown. Riverbend Phase 2 to really promote our quality of life and provide this multimodal for the community. And then this is the third of the Brio corridors. We completed the Dyer and also to include the pedestrian enhancements. So Montana, we have the funds appropriated and we've let the project, but we haven't had the funds transferred over from FTA yet. We're hoping, yes, ma'am, that is the fourth and final corridor. Yes, ma'am. So for active projects, we currently have about 114 million in active projects with a staff of 12 people. And these include a PDN roundabout. We will start in February of next year. We want to get through the holiday season, and that's on El Paso Drive at the PDN Port of Entry. We have two projects, Phase 1 and 2, for bicycle connectivity. That's to provide the connectivity for bicycle lanes throughout the city, and it's in line with the City of El Paso Bike Plan. Pedestrian improvements within the Chamizal neighborhood, we have two phases. We're nearing completion on CBD 4, which are street improvements, bike lanes, and pedestrian enhancements. And then the reconstruction of 4 bridges to include Alabama, Davis, Delta, and Yarborough. We currently have 2 projects in construction, University, which is nearing completion. It complements also with the work that UTEP is doing, and they will finish this bike lane and pedestrian enhancements once you go into the university. And we have 6 corridors, 2 of which are completed, and we are currently working within 3 corridors. This project should be finished in spring of next year. And here's the Montana RTS. As soon as we get those funds transferred over, we will begin the project, and we're nearing completion for the pedestrian enhancements along this route. And Far East Terminal, this project just recently advertised. Yes. Mhm. And that concludes my presentation, if you have any questions. Yes, and we're looking to increase. One of the things as well is not only dependent upon the UTP and the funding, is also aggressively going after grants. So that would be another request, is that if we were to vet those projects with you and to get letters of support so that we can seek other funding sources. Mhm. That could be a potential, yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you, sorry. The county's comprehensive plan, we've sort of been there, like the executor of that plan for them on large scale, and I think it's proved to be a really good partnership in terms of delivering the projects on budget, on time, and just being able to bundle them a little differently with the resources we have. So if you would give some thought to maybe looking at that.
I know currently, that was not provided in the presentation, Wynn Road is being administered
Okay.
by the RMA. Yes, ma'am. The construction management oversight.
Okay, good. So, yeah, because we're wrapping up some of our larger projects that we've had in the past. The 2008's pretty much done. Some of the big work with TxDOT's done. So we're looking ahead to see how we can continue to provide value to the region, and maybe help expedite some of the projects that if they go through the normal queue, they might otherwise like take a little bit longer.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
And thank you again for, I'm sorry, you have a question?
Is there a way to get more as we go into the December planning session? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we may want to discuss further in December.
I think we've invited the partners to come to the meeting. Did we not? Yeah. We've invited them to come to the planning session with us, just to be there as a resource. It's an open session, so it's open to the public. They're going to send us the county's materials So if you have any specific questions about any of the specific projects from any of the agencies, let Raymond know, and then maybe he can get some follow-up and get those questions answered. But we did invite the partners to the meeting, so as we're talking, if we have any technical questions.
There were a lot of projects that were presented on the presentation today. Some of them are obviously familiar to us because of at least my limited experience on here. We're at the Hampton. It would have been nice actually along the way to see what exactly we got our hands on, what we did. You know, it's not a long time. Following that through some of the presentations.
Okay.
What we're working on, what we're working. To your point, to what extent could we help? And I'm kind of wondering if some of these were already not involved in.
Do you have the 2008? I know Eduardo went, is that in here?
The
I think
plan
it'd be really
itself-
good for the new members to have sort of the history of all the projects the RMA has done.
Okay, I can
Like
do
the
that.
2008 mobility plan.
So I have a running list of the projects the RMA has been involved in, and it identifies what our activity was, whether it was financing, planning, design,
Yeah, why don't
construction.
would you send that?
Yes.
Would you send that to
Certainly.
everybody, particularly the newer members?
Certainly.
It'll give you a historical perspective, because it goes back to like 2007, I guess, when we
Correct.
put the RMA together.
There was a lot going on in Montana, and no one
Yeah.
sure if the project she was talking about was the same one that we come up.
I think Montana is a tech stop project, right? The Montana expansion.
Correct.
She's talking about the rapid transit.
Yes.
The bus, the RTS at the rapid transit. But actually, even those we could do, couldn't we, the rapid RTS? Yeah, we don't have, it's not just road projects, some of the street and everything. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're at the end. There was a couple, there's item 8 was a short update that Robert was going to do. Do you mind staying for a few more minutes and let him go through it? Okay. It's all yours. You got 15 minutes
Won't need 15 minutes.
maximum
So item 8A is
for
just
the meter.
an update on B-Cycle World. Is a conference that I attended along with Cesar, our bike share operator. It was really nice to meet with some of the other systems and talk to them. We have a lot of similar challenges that they do. Need for operating dollars and growing ridership. We pivoted last year from looking at what they call their dash bikes, which are dockless bikes, and we instead went and purchased the electronic assist bikes. That was the
Thank you all again. Thanks for spending so much time, too.
That was the absolute right choice to make. The
Tell
da-
me the difference between options and then you chose what?
So we originally were looking at going to dockless and adding some dockless bikes to our,
Between the bike that
yes, sir, you can park anywhere, yes. We would have had some regulations, I'm sure, with the city as we looked into it, but we decided not to do that. We did the electronic pedal assist bicycles, which ended up being a really good decision. The dash bikes, as they're called, the dockless, they weren't discussed really. The systems I talked to one city, they had bought a group of them and they just were not pleased, a lot of issues with them. And it seems to be, even with our vendor Trek, who hosted the conference, that e-bikes are the way of the future, and that's really the push. It's not necessarily to go dockless, but to go
To the
e-bikes.
e-bikes.
So Madison, which is right near where the Trek headquarters is and where the conference was, they switched out their entire fleet from original bikes like we have, the red ones, to 300 e-bikes. They don't have any of the dockless, so you can tell that's the direction of the company. And if you've still not been on an e-bike, I highly encourage it. It is quite a bit of a difference in riding on a bike. Yes, sir.
forgive me for maybe missing a distinction. When you say dockless, do you mean it has no engine that helps power it?
Correct.
So just a bike?
It's just a bike.
And you're saying that the future lies in a bicycle that will drive you around?
A little, so they're pedalless, and you have to be pedaling to have motion, but
But it makes it easier.
it makes it much easier to go further distance. For us, the thought behind it
Like
was,
exercise bike on zero or no tension?
I don't know what that sounds.
it makes it easier, it lowers the barrier to entry for some people to get on a bike. It makes it easier, and then you can ride a lot further. You do have to be pedaling for the assistance to be there, I took it on a hill with our operator, last Friday or the Friday beforehand, and it was kind of, oh man, that was a lot easier than I thought. So with our hills, especially in our footprint of where we're located, that two-way cycle track on Stanton, having e-bikes to help people to go up those hills and just navigate up that direction is a big help.
So let me ask you, you sent us an update about you're expanding a station up in Utah somewhere? Is that what you sent us?
Yes, so we're looking at the Mission Hills Park.
Yeah.
now As the new station
It's not-
addition.
You should put my camera. Come on, man, actually, you probably get a lot of use because this one is not good at all. That one's probably-
So I'm glad that you mentioned that update. We also just got approval. So we're going through the approval process with the city on Mission Hills. We just got approval for our new station at Arts Festival Plaza. You'll recall we had Pioneer, and it got pulled out. And so now we're going to be relocated right outside of where that restaurant is, facing the hotels near the Plaza Theater. So we're going to be right there hopefully very soon. The other thing I want to tell you about at Bicycle World was they had new product offerings. So if you're familiar with our stations, we've got a big kiosk where people go in and actually check out the bikes. It's got a solar panel above it to power it in most instances. And then there's the docks that are connected to that. The new docks that they're coming out with are a little bit different, and you can kind of do one-off docks, and I think we'll have to send you some pictures of them. But they'll be smaller and a little bit easier to install and much cheaper. So one of the issues that we faced is, hey, look, it really only makes sense to put like 5 or 7 docks here. Well, the cost of the kiosk was so much that it almost made no sense to do a small station. Most other bike share stations did 15 and 21 dock stations. We just can't find the space to do that sort of thing. So what this would give us, if we wanted to do it in the future, is the ability to expand a little easier and say, you know what, we're gonna put a mini station of just 3 docks near this business's location because they wanna have bikes right near them and have access to them. And that would just give us a little more flexibility to kind of pick up and move stations. So I thought that was a cool thing, and it seemed to be a big hit with the operators as, wow, this would bring the cost down to put more stations out in the field. And Trek, the vendor, has heard that feedback from the operators of it's just so cost prohibitive to put in a new station or a small station. So then the next update is on the audit. Yes, sir.
What's going on with scooters? What's all this stuff? That's not related
That's not
in
us.
any way whatsoever to the bike share.
No, sir. The scooters are operated by a private entity based out of El Paso. They have their own pilot program with the city that's governing them. We have a special privilege license that allows us to operate, and it's 2 different kind of governance structures for each of us. So they've got rules. They have to share all of their data with the city. They have to, I think, report on what's happening with their fleet. We don't have those same types of rules, but we're not involved. And as a reminder, in our last update, our numbers have been good despite the competition, if you will. So next update is just really quick on the audit. We were hoping to have our final numbers from the city at the end of October. We didn't get them until last week. We provided them to the auditor. I've got a call scheduled with her tomorrow, and we're gonna jump headlong into that. We are a little bit, I think, behind of where we'd like to be, not much. We are targeting hopefully January. There is an issue. The January board meeting is actually the earliest it could possibly be. It's the 8th, is the second Wednesday. And so depending on when we get our audit back, I may request that we have a special board meeting to accept that. We'd obviously take it to the finance committee first, but we meet January 8th right now, and then we don't meet again until February 12th. And if we get the audit report in that timeframe to help the city with its audit, we may want to accept our audit earlier. And so I just wanted to put that on your radar as a possibility that we may make that request of you all.
Could the finance committee accept it on our behalf and then ratify it at the February meeting?
Let me look at that. It's an advisory board, so I wouldn't think so. But let me look at that. And then what we've done in the past, but what we have done in the past is,
Move the meeting back.
right, we could push January a little bit to eat up some of that time between the early January and
Like the
late February.
15th?
We could do something like that. But it really all depends on how this process goes between the city, us, and our outside auditor. So before we start moving anything,
Right.
we'll keep an eye on it.
Well, if you need to do that, let's talk about it at the December meeting.
Sure.
Meeting on the 11th.
Refresh my memory on how you probably talked about it in the last meeting. Is this a standard deal or
Have a
is this?
conference.
Yes, every single year.
Well, the city has its own.
We have a third party, the city, because the city's our fiscal agent, they include our numbers in their, and so that's why we need to have ours done early enough to get to them. Yes, sir. Okay. So that's why we would potentially want to meet before that second week in February to give them our numbers.
And they issue a separate received audit for CRRMA.
Yes. Yes. Yes, sir. And that's all I have for you.
Minor detail. Okay, so we have no executive session, right? All right, so I'll take a, well, before we adjourn, next week, we're gonna be meeting over on Texas Street for our retreat, our planning retreat. He'll send the notice out, so that's the 11th. There's a better room in the basement where it's like more space. We'll get you a copy of the list. Make sure you give us a copy of the, list of all the RMA projects since inception, and the roles, and then the county, updates, so we've got that, because these other ones, they're actually really good. Did a nice job of putting together. Well, I did it from 9 to noon. I don't think we'll need more than that. If we need more than that, we, till 1 at the latest, I think, but I don't think we.
One of the things in the survey is, I wanted to be able to print out all my responses.
She's tabulated them all, and she sent us a preliminary. The thing is, like, the graph is kind of weird, and, but she'll clean that up and we'll send it to you in advance. I just got it before I came over and I saw it.
Well, and it includes an 8th entry, so I'm asking her to look at that because we didn't submit, so I think we did a test.
There might, but it's X's, it's all X's, so I don't know.
Well, but there are
Some
8.
remarks.
No, I just mean that there were 8
There's 8,
individuals
I
that
know.
took it, but there should have only been
It's
7.
7, yeah. I think the 8th one just shows X's though, so I don't know if that's a dummy, like.
Could be.
'cause I
Tracy's
was-
looking at it.
Because if you look at them, they're all just X's, it's like XXX.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that means. It might be something in the program that she used.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll have that
but we'll
figured
get
out.
all that to you before the meeting, yeah.
A little clarity on the December 11 meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a normal
Board meeting.
meeting or not?
So
Yes.
what we're
In terms of
doing,
the date.
the date is a normal meeting.
And I have now, I have that in my calendar at 9 a.m. But then I have at 10:30, the strategic planning session. And both events I have them at City Hall.
Yeah, we're gonna move them. The same thing. I've asked
We'll
Ray,
start at 9
Yeah.
a.m. and hold a regular meeting.
yeah, but I've asked Raymond that I only want action items. Just anything that we have to approve, so we can spend all the time, like, really in the facilitated discussion.
And you're not anticipating, because I currently have it blocked out till 2:30, and who knows how long it
Yeah,
will go.
I
That's fine.
just
You're
thought-
hoping it's not.
Well, no, I figured we needed a half a day. I didn't know that we'd take a whole day, but if we need to, we will. We can order lunch or whatever. Order lunch.
Forgive me. It's not at City Hall, instead it's at your.
It's going to be Texas.
Yeah.
So, and I'll send,
Just do a calendar update for us.
Okay.
Send out a calendar update with the location.
Sure.
And then do it from like 9 to 1, so people block out 4 hours, that way they've got it blocked out on their schedule. I mean, if we can start, if we get through the business like in 30 minutes, which I think we can, I mean, we did it pretty quick today, we had some meaty items, then we can really go into a conversation. And I mean, I've worked with Tracy Yellen on facilitating, and what she normally does is we'll have a lot of dialogue. She may break us into groups, and have people work on different things, come back and report out. And when we're done, she'll take everything we did, and she'll go clean it up and synthesize it and put it in the report, and then we'll get it back. And then we'll get it back at our January meeting probably, so we'll have another chance to kind of look at it, and look at it organized, in a document format. We can have more discussion about if there's something that we don't agree in, whatever, and then approve it, and then go from there. I think the other thing is when we approve it, we we also should prioritize, like what, I mean, once we go through this stuff, if we've got things that are important, we need to figure out like who's gonna be like the lead on certain things on the board and the staff, to help make sure that we drive it.
Have we done this in the past?
Not like this. No. This is the first facilitated strategic planning.
And part of it is that a lot of the work that this organization's done is done. It's done. So it's kind of like, where are we going now from here? Like, what's on the horizon of opportunities? Aside from
Yeah,
the
it's true.
county. I mean, the county looks like it'll be a long-term partner with us, but where's it going? That's why I wanted these agencies to come in so we could see like exactly what's going on out there, which is a lot of stuff. So-
And there's nothing that prohibits us from working within the agreement.
No, it's all through an agreement. It's just getting them to sort of let go and want to work with us. Now, Eduardo at MPO is actually a really good advocate for RMA. He was with TxDOT when we set it up. And we did a lot of work with TxDOT early on, and then it kind of got less and less. And so I think that's probably our biggest opportunity is to reestablish that connection with Tomas and see like, how can we help move some of these projects?
Right. Yeah, there's a change of guard at
Yeah.
TxDOT, and I think now's the time to revisit.
Yeah,
And Eddie Valtier,
and they got a lot of projects too, that they probably could use some help with.
agreed. Eddie Valtier, who is currently second in charge over there in the district, is also very supportive of the RMA and was around with
When we did some of
Calvo
the
and
early
all of us as we were
projects,
putting all this together. So he's another good advocate for us.
The other thing that if we could really try to advocate with the city, is that, and I don't know that this is true or not, but I've been told that we do, like our bidding, like under the TxDOT federal state guidelines, which like we understand them and our contractors understand, so we don't get into issues. The city doesn't necessarily do that. They have some of their own rules, which creates other problems with compliance. And then they run into problems, and so if we could like really convince them on some of these federally funded projects to let us manage them, I think we could save them some headaches. So, but,
On the other side is the staff, the way that's all set up, I think we can do it. They could put them in a seat above, oversee, that oversight that allows. So that's why I was asking some of the questions about how big of a staff do you have to make the bridge? I mean, that's a phenomenal scope, the width of that scope of those bridges. And he's got a very small staff. And I don't know how that's all resourced.
they contracted out a lot, like we have our vendors list and stuff, it's just that the way we do it is much more efficient. And they do it on a project by project basis, so it's like starting, every time you have a project, you start over. Instead of going out and having a list of projects and going out and getting all your A&E and all of that on the front end, so you have like a list, and so then you just, who's next on the list, you negotiate who's next on the list.
I would expect the same narrowness of scope of the capital improvements part of the city. And that's why I was thinking, that, just like you stated, what role we could play in helping historically, as opposed to, everyone knows what they do.
But if you look at Sal from the county, I mean, he's like a one-man show. I mean, we're like their capital planning department. I mean, it's like, he's totally outsourced that to us. And so, he basically is just managing the relationship and making sure like we're doing everything to their standard. I mean, he doesn't have a huge staff. I mean, we're like his staff. And so part of it is like looking at us as a third-party vendor to.
Quality of what's almost been done, it's always going to.
Yeah. And I think part of it is because we have Atkins and done really good oversight. I mean, we have good contractors. They like manage everything, like, I don't think we've had a project that's had a problem, a big problem. I mean, but I'm saying like where we get into, you
Agreed.
know, like litigation, major delays, budget overruns, I mean, you get, the project stops for a long period of time. You know, yeah,
We've actually, we've had really good luck with the CMP projects in terms of the bids that have coming in, that have come in. They've all been, I think without exception, they've all been lower than the engineer's estimate. Now, what you're seeing in Pelicano is very different. The $6 million swing is very different and and frankly made us very nervous, very similar to Mission Ridge 2, which came in prior. That's right. So what we do on those is we spent, and we talked a little bit about this at the Mission Ridge award because it was similar. It was a very large swing between the low bidder and the next low bidder. So we go through line item by line item on those bids to make sure that the contractor didn't miss anything. We actually have them on the phone going through them, telling us, how did you get so low versus everybody else versus our engineering estimate? In this case, in both Mission Ridge 2 and Pelicano, the low bid is JAR, and they have acquired a materials outfit.
yeah.
So they're providing,
vertically integrated.
they're providing their own materials, and that's how virtually every one of the ones, especially with percentages over 20% in savings, that's where they're recognizing it.
Okay, so can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
11:35.